Hello guys, today we will be discussing the part 2 of tissue repair. So please make sure you have already watched part 1 because after discussing the remaining concepts, we will be going through a few clinical scenarios relevant to the theory we have discussed. So please like, subscribe and share this video if you find it useful. So let's begin the session. So first of all, what are we going to discuss in this session? We are going to discuss about the abnormal wound healing and scarring. So already we have learned about how a wound heals, the tissue repairs in the previous lecture. So what is the abnormality in it? So it can be either a delay in wound healing leading to chronic wounds, or excessive wound healing leading to excessive scarring and wound contracture. So first of all, let's discuss about the deficient wound healing or the deficient tissue repair. We will be learning about venous ulcers, arterial ulcers, about diabetic ulcers and also pressure sores. So the first one is venous ulcers. So venous ulcers, what is the cause of venous ulcers? So it is venous hypertension. When can you get venous hypertension? If you have varicosities, that is one reason. The second reason is congestive heart failure, which raises the pressure in the veins which are attached to the heart, the superior and inferior vena cava, leading to venous hypertension. So there is deficiency of oxygen supply to the tissue and accompanied with RBC lysis. RBC lysis. So the lysis of RBCs produces hemosiderin, which is a brownish colored pigment. So this diagram, what is depicting is a venous ulcers. You can see a brownish discoloration as well as an ulcer. The brownish discoloration is due to the hemosiderin, which is produced by RBC lysis. Next, arterial ulcers. Again, in diabetic patients, there will be, and many other factors also contribute to something known as atherosclerosis. So this atherosclerotic plaques, it blocks the vessels. So if a vessel is blocked, the blood supply is blocked, and that leads to ischemia. And if it persists for a long time, necrosis, which we have seen, necrosis of the skin and the underlying connective tissue, which we are seeing as the ulcer. It will be pretty painful. Arterial ulcers will be pretty painful. Speaking about something known as pressure sores. So pressure sores, the name gives it. If there is prolonged compression of soft tissue against a prominent structure like a bone, so that is going to cause the ulceration, the necrosis of that region. So the mechanical compression of that particular region is going to block the blood supply, and if it prolongs, leads to necrosis and gives such an appearance. Pressure sores is very common in people who are bedridden for a long time, like stroke patients, and it can be a cause for secondary embolism also. Now diabetic ulcer, it is also another kind of deficient wound healing. So in diabetic people, if there is any wound in a diabetic patient, it takes more time to heal. So more, it will become a non-healing ulcer and also a place for secondary infections also. So this figure depicts a diagram of diabetic ulcer. So all these diagrams are taken from Robbins. So next, what is shown in the figure, it's a microscopic appearance of a diabetic ulcer known as ulcer crater. CRATER, ulcer crater. So what you are seeing is the epithelial ulceration. The epithelium is shed off. Next, again, this is a picture of diabetic ulcer. I told you it will be non-healing type. So also it is a part of the body where secondary infections can come. So once infections come, inflammation takes place to remove the offending agent. So in this diagram, you can see a lot of inflammatory cells which have invaded the area to remove the offending agent or infection in a diabetic ulcer. Also taken from Rubens. So the last four cases were that of deficient wound healing. What if the wound healing is more? What if the scarring is more? We learned two headings: hypertrophic wounds and keloids. So hypertrophic wounds are commonly caused after thermal and traumatic injuries. So the scarring is excessive. There is excessive accumulation of connective tissue, that is collagen, and the scar appears raised above the skin level. Normally after certain months this scarring, this excessive scarring regresses. Now what if it does not regress? Then it produces something known as keloid, where again after an injury repair takes place, scarring takes place, but scarring is so much and it does not regress after few months like the hypertrophic scar. So that is known as keloid. You can see again the appearance of keloid and the microscopic appearance. You can see the dense deposition of connective tissue and the thickened epithelium in this diagram. So that were the abnormalities in wound healing. We discussed venous ulcers, arterial ulcers, diabetic ulcers, pressure sores, and after that we discussed about keloids and hypertrophic scars, which were examples of increased scarring. Now similarly, as a wound heals, if there is injury to any tissue, any parenchymal organ, that part, that injured part will be replaced by fibrous tissue. That is called fibrosis. Again, if there is any damage, if there is only limited injury, if there is severe injury. If the injury is limited, as we have learned in video 1, there will be regeneration and the epithelium will grow back. But if there is severe injury, this will lead to inflammation, where inflammatory cells will come, will produce many mediators, will cause the fibroblast to differentiate into myofibroblast, which will produce a lot of collagen, and that injured area will be replaced by connective tissue, which is known as fibrosis. So this follows the exactly same mechanism as that of a wound, fibrosis. So I expect that you have understood, this completes the theory portion of tissue repair, and in order and I'm hopeful that you understood the very basic concept of tissue healing, the various methods, regeneration and repair by scarring, and also a few abnormalities in wound healing and excessive scarring. Now we will be discussing some of the clinical questions, clinical scenarios that is also given in the Robin's review of pathology. So we'll be discussing almost 10 questions in this session, and after finishing, after I read out each questions, please try to pause the video and try to find the answer yourself and then watch me doing it. So I guess it will be more helpful that way. So the first question: in an experiment, a group of test animals is infected with viral hepatitis. Okay. 2 months later, complete recovery of the normal liver architecture is observed. That is the first case. A control test group is also infected with bacterial organisms, and after the same period of time, that is 2 months, fibrous scars form resolving hepatic abscesses are seen microscopically. So the first case there was a complete regeneration, and the second case there were fibrosis. Okay, and in the second case we can see that the infection progressed to liver abscesses, right? Which of the following factors best explains the different outcomes of two test groups? So one case you can see that the liver architecture is completely regained, the liver completely regenerates following viral hepatitis, and in the other case what we see is scarring, that is the damaged part is filled with connective tissue. So what will be the reason? So the hepatocytes, the liver cells, have considerable regeneration capacity, right? But what if they don't have a framework upon which they can regenerate? If there is sufficient damage to the liver tissue, it's destroying sufficient connective tissue, even though the residual cells, hepatocytes are present, on which on what can they regenerate? So that is a big question. And the injury to the connective tissue framework, if severe, even though the hepatocytes are remaining, will cause fibrosis, because there is nothing on which the cells can regenerate. The other options, nature of the injurious etiologic agent, location of the lesion in the liver, extent of hepatocyte injury, and the extent of damage of bile ducts, all will say or comment upon how much the injury is caused. But for repair, what you need is a connective tissue framework upon which the epithelium can, or the hepatocytes can, divide and regenerate. But if it is lost, the connective tissue is lost, it will become more difficult and progress towards fibrosis. So let's move on to the next question. A 51-year-old woman tests positive for hepatitis A in her body her serum AST levels is 275 units per liter, ALT is 310 unit per liter. 1 month later, this enzyme levels have returned to normal. What phase of cell cycle best describes the hepatocytes 1 month after her infection? So during the infection, the serum AST and ALT levels are raised very much, right? That is indicating tissue injury, the injury to the liver tissue, that is fine. After 1 month, the enzymes are back to normal. That is, the tissue injury is repaired. The wound has healed. So, in that stage, which stage of the cell cycle is the hepatocytes in? That is a question. So, in the normal liver, what is it in? I've already discussed the liver belongs to the stable group of cells, right? So they can divide, but they divide on demand. Now after 1 month, the demand is done. So they enter back into the quiescent stage or the stable stage. So the answer should be G naught. The next question. A 54-year-old man undergoes laparoscopic hernia repair. The surgery is done. In spite of small size of the incisions, he has poor wound healing. He has poor wound healing. Further history reveals that his normal diet has poor nutritional value and is deficient in vitamin C. Synthesis of which of the following extracellular matrix components is most affected? So it is basically vitamin C deficiency. So already we have commented on factors what affects wound healing, that if malnourishment is a feature, it will affect or delay the wound healing. Now vitamin C, what does it specifically inhibit? Vitamin C, the deficiency in vitamin C will decrease the action of lysyl oxidase enzyme. Lysyl oxidase enzyme. And what is the requirement or need of lysyl oxidase enzyme? For cross-linking collagen. So soon after a wound is formed, the fibroblast will come to that region, will start producing collagen, will start secreting collagen. Now this doesn't produce the scar. After the collagen is produced, a step known as remodeling should be done so that the collagen is specially arranged to form the scar. So that is known as remodeling, where the collagen are cross-linked to increase the strength of the wound. That cross-linking step is done with the help of lysyl oxidase, and since vitamin C deficiency decreases the lysyl oxidase enzyme, so it will also decrease the cross-linking of collagen. So which extracellular matrix component is most affected? Collagen. Collagen is most affected. Now the next question. In an experiment, glass beads are embolized into the coronary arteries of rats, resulting in myocardial injury. Okay. After 7 days, sections of myocardium are studied using light microscopy. The microscopic appearance of one of the section is shown in the figure. Which of the following mediators? We have to find the mediator responsible for this appearance. So if you remember properly, in the previous lecture we have discussed this is the appearance of a granulation tissue. So there is lot of angiogenesis happening over there. You can see lot of blood vessels in the cross section. You can see lot of blood vessels in the cross sections, and what you are seeing in this blue color is the developing collagen. So the fibroblast have just started developing the collagen, synthesizing the collagen. The prominent appearance of this diagram is the angiogenesis. And what helps in angiogenesis? The first step of angiogenesis is, if you remember, vasodilation. For vasodilation, you need a vasodilator. NO, nitric oxide, acts as a vasodilator. What increases the production of NO? That is vascular endothelial growth factor. So that should be the answer. Next question. A 20-year-old woman undergoes C-section, deliver a term infant, and the lower abdominal incision is sutured. The sutures are removed 1 week later. Which of the following statements best describes the wound site at the time of suture removal? That is, after 1 week, what exactly is happening at the incision wound? That is a question. So, granulation tissue is still present. The first day of wound healing, what happens? Platelet plug will be formed so as to stop the bleeding, right? and the inflammatory cells will start appearing. The second to third day, the granulation tissue will start producing, right? After 2 weeks, the collagen synthesis is going on and the collagen is prominent, not dense. After 1 month, the collagen is dense. Most of the scar is composed of collagen. And by 3 months, the wound regains 80% strength of the normal tissue. So this is what happening. So 1 week later, granulation tissue is prominent in second to third day. So this is not the answer. No more wound strength will be gained. No, collagen is depositing, keeping on depositing, wound strength will be gained. So this is wrong. Type 4 collagen predominates. Collagen is prominent from the 2 week onwards, not 1 week. So this is wrong. Wound strength will be 80% of normal tissue, that is by 3 months. So here the collagen synthesis has not yet begun in the full force. So 1 week later, collagen degradation is still exceeding the synthesis. So by elimination, we came to the right answer. So the next question, a 24-year-old man with acute appendicitis, okay, acute appendicitis, undergoes surgical removal of the inflamed appendix. The incision site is sutured. A trichrome stained section representative of the site with blue appearing collagen is shown in the figure. How long after the injury will the appearance mostly be seen? So what you can see here is a scar tissue. Again, this diagram has been discussed in the previous session. So this is the scar tissue which has dense collagen. Dense collagen. So this almost shows that the wound healing is approaching the final step. Okay, so that is in the following option, 1 month would be the right answer. The timeline of wound healing has been discussed in the previous question. So I guess it will be easy for you to understand. The next question. A 40-year-old man underwent laparotomy for a perforated sigmoid colon diverticulum. A wound infection complicated the post-operative course and surgical wound dehiscence occurred. Primary closure was no longer possible and the wound granulated in. 6 weeks later, the wound is only 10% of its original size, that is, the wound contracted. Which of the following processes will account for the observed decrease in wound size? So wound contraction, the past 6 weeks. So if you remember, while we drew the picture of a wound, I told you fibroblast through the end of the wound, edge of the wound, will migrate to the center and will differentiate into myofibroblast. Now myo it is known as because of the presence of actin filaments. So this will help in contracting or pulling the edges together. So what accounts to the decreased wound size? Myofibroblast contraction, right? The next question. In an experiment involving observations on wound healing, researchers noted that intracytoplasmic cytoskeletal elements, including actin, that is the elements which give the cell the strength, it's a framework, interact with the extracellular matrix proteins to promote cell attachment and migration. So the keywords are cell attachment and migration in wound healing. Which of the following substances is most likely responsible for such interaction? So basically the question means what connects the intracellular cytoplasmic cytoskeletal elements to the extracellular matrix proteins. So what connects or what attaches? Epidermal growth factor is a chemical which helps in increasing the regeneration of epithelium. Okay. Fibronectin is a connective tissue material like collagen. Now you have type 4 collagen. Again, it is a connective tissue, fibrous tissue material. Vascular endothelial growth factor helps in angiogenesis. Platelet derived growth factor, integrin. Integrin is the attaching molecule which helps attaching the cytoskeletal components of the cell with the extracellular matrix proteins. you have studied more about integrin in the inflammation chapter in the while you learn the rolling adhesion during the leukocyte recruitment process. Next question. A 23-year-old woman receiving corticosteroid therapy for an autoimmune disease, she is on steroids that will suppress her immune system, has an abscess or an infection, a pus filled infection on her upper outer right arm. Okay. She undergoes minor surgery to incise and drain the abscess, but the wound healing is poor over the next month. Which of the following aspects of wound healing is affected by this on this patient? So this this effect is due to the corticosteroids, cortisols, which will suppress the immune system. So why is wound healing deficient in this person? Reepithelialization? No, that is by epidermal growth factor, not anyway affected by the steroids. Serine proteinase is a matrix metalloproteinase. Neutrophil infiltration is also not prevented by steroids. Elaboration of VEGF angio inhibited by steroids. What is left is collagen deposition. Collagen deposition, the step of collagen deposition is the one which is negatively impacted by the administration of corticosteroids or immunosuppressants in this lady. The next one, an 18-year-old man lacerated had a cut in his left ear and required suturing. The sutures were removed 1 week later. Wound healing continued, but the site became disfigured over the next 2 months. Which of the following terms best describes the process? So after healing, after scarring, if the scar formation is more and does not regress, so if the scar formation is more, we called it hypertrophic wound. And if it regresses after some time, what if it doesn't regress after some time? It is known as keloid formation. So what you are seeing here is an excessive scarring of the ear of the person who underwent a surgery. Excessive scarring, excessive fibrous tissue deposition, that is known as keloid formation. Dehiscence is the turning out of wound. Organization is the process in which the fibrous tissue is converted into granulation tissue. Resolution is the complete restoring of the tissue to normal. Secondary union is another process in wound healing. So keloid formation best explains what is shown in the diagram. The last question, a 58-year-old man had chest pain persisting for 4 hours. A radiographic imaging procedure showed an infarction involving a 4 centimeter area in the posterior left ventricular free wall. Lab findings showed increased creatine kinase level 600 units per liter, which is very much increased. Which of the following pathological findings will be most likely seen in the left ventricular lesion 1 month later? So 1 month is a sufficient time for wound healing. So there is an infarction, so there is severe injury to the tissue, so that will be filled by fibrous tissue after 1 month. So what you can see in the heart, in the ventricle, you can see a fibrous scar, because heart is belonging to the category of permanent tissues. So that the capability of division is very poor in the myocardial cells. So if there is injury, the only way to fill the gap will be the production of fibrous tissue. So fibrous scar would be the correct answer after 1 month duration. So I believe you have got a very basic essence of what is tissue repair, what is the abnormalities that can happen in tissue repair, and to make it more stronger in your mind, we have discussed a few clinical scenarios. Hope this session was very useful for you.